So, Bill, your work has shown us that authentic leadership isn't just a nice to have, it's essential for sustainable success. Welcome to our conversation.
Thank you, Claudius. Good to be with you.
It's wonderful starting off with you today. So, before we launch into our conversation, I thought to draw a few parallels between our works, where True North depicts a destination to move toward. The life cycle of a CEO lays out a roadmap to navigate the journey towards that destination. And that's been the backbone of many of our conversations. Three things that stand out to me were authenticity as a competitive advantage, right? We both reject the notion that leaders must fit a predetermined mold. Second, leadership as continued development. We both agree that leadership is always a work in progress, never with the realization that we never fully get there. And then third, the power of self-awareness, right? That authentic leadership requires deep self-knowledge in order to master the leadership journey. It requires an understanding which stage someone is in and adjusting accordingly. So let me open up our conversation with a question to you, Bill. You said that authentic leaders have a true north, an internal compass based on their values and beliefs. What's the biggest mistake that you see leaders make when trying to discover their authentic leadership?
So thank you for that question. Before I get to it, let me say that I believe strongly in the idea of the life cycle of the CEO, just like I believe that the life cycle of us as human beings, we go through different stages in life. And to specifically point out with CEOs, Claudius, I've found many CEOs fail. They come in with a group of ideas and they kind of lock into those ideas and they don't want to change. But the whole point is you have to lead in a context and conditions around you change. Now, I think you may adapt your strategy and your tactics, but you can't change the essence of what you believe, your purpose and your values. And when you do, that makes you wholly inauthentic. And that's where I find a lot of CEOs getting off track, or they don't know how to conclude their career on a high note, so they wind up getting pushed out. Now, the biggest mistake that I believe authentic leaders make, and the reason I wrote all my books, starting in 2003 with Authentic Leadership and then with True North, is that leaders either don't know who they are or they get so caught up with external validation, which is the case. Money, fame, and power are the great seducers. And when your goal is money, fame, or power, you're going to lose it. There could be no better current example than Elon Musk, who is a brilliant inventor who created great companies, but he lost sight of that when he decided to become the most famous. And he bought Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it and went on a journey to become all powerful. And he's just lost a battle with the president of the United States trying to be the most powerful. It's not about power. Really, as a leader, it's about empowering other people. And so I think when you get caught up in your fame, or you want a better title, or you want a bigger and bigger corporation when it shouldn't be, that's when you're in trouble. And I've seen this happen to so many leaders. It's really a tragedy. The reason is because as you ascend to a position like CEO, you have enormous amount of responsibility and you're harming everyone in your organization. They get dragged down with you. And that's happened at Tesla. You can see it in real time.
Bill, it's such a great point that you're raising. And money, fame, and power was a theme that we heard a ton in our conversations with CEOs about their life cycle. And it's not just that it's there from the beginning, but it's these constant sirens, right? Like as they're leading in the role, like it can just creep into the system. And I remember one chairman that we talked to, he was putting a nail on the head. He said the corporate jet is the crack cocaine for every CEO. And I think that speaks exactly to that theme that you're mentioning there. So in you know in our own work, we've discovered these predictable stages. How might the principles of authentic leadership need to be applied differently as leaders think about navigating the various life cycle stages that they're in?
Well, I believe that, your authentic leadership is who you are. That doesn't change, but how you apply that, you have to be flexible in how you approach situations and people and be adaptive. I do believe the leaders have to adapt their approach to situations, adapt their style, but that doesn't change who you are. So when you give up your purpose and your values, then you're in trouble. But you can adapt your strategy, you can adapt your tactics, you can adapt your relationships with people. With some people, you have to be very firm and directive. Other people, you want to just be a good counselor and a listener. And I think all of those things portraying you still be authentic. You still stay true to your values. If you want to be a moral leader, if you believe in integrity, then you can't tell people one thing and do another because you've compromised your integrity. So I do believe in this idea of adaptability and flexibility as a leader, particularly in today's environment. The world is changing so rapidly. Leaders today are not trained, have been trained to lead in stable times, but it's actually chaotic. And the world is constantly changing every day. And if you're not, don't have that solid core, no one who works with you will know where to go. And so be true to that no matter what you do.
Such a great point. And Bill, by the way, I know I'm asking all the questions, but everyone who's listening in right now, please add to the chat. We'll want to make sure to bring your questions into the conversation as well. And while you're typing your questions, let me just follow up with a point here, Bill, that, you know, you write about being tested in those crucible moments. And I think that's what you were getting at a second ago. And today feels to some like one big extended moment, right? One crucible after another. So how do authentic leaders navigate those situations when one of those crucible moments is quickly followed by another? I mean, it's tiring, right?
Well, you're really referring to two types of crucibles. There's crucible, my crucible. Uh, I had my marriage fell apart. I got fired from my job. This didn't go well. I had a healthcare tragedy in my own family. That's a personal crucible, or it's a professional crucible for me. But you're also talking about the crucibles that organizations are facing right now, maybe because they didn't stay true to their true north. And that gets back to the adaptability. So yeah, we're going through a time when you can say societally there are crucibles all over the place. And that just calls on you to stand up as a leader, not to be a world-class manager. Okay, you have to do that too, but to really be a leader and to take control of the situation. And people want to know who you are, where you stand, and can we follow? Do we know you're solid? And when people don't do that, then you're in trouble as a leader. So I think you adapt to the external crucible moments, but you have to deal with your own internal ones as well.
And such a great point, right? And I think what you're saying here is you also challenge the traditional notion that leaders must project invincibility at every given moment, right? I think you shared some very personal moments here. I think you're also getting at the point that with so much rapid change, you cannot just always have all the answers to lead with full confidence from the front. So, um, tell us a little bit how showing vulnerability actually strengthens the leadership position.
Well, I've experienced that in my own life, and I try to express people from losing my mother and my fiance when I was younger, losing 7 elections in a row, to my wife having breast cancer, to perhaps the most relevant business one is I found myself en route to the top at Honeywell, great global corporation. It had been my goal to run a great global corporation, but I realized there was no sense of purpose. The only purpose was making money. And yeah, we know how to make money, but that's because you serve a greater purpose, not the reverse. And so I realized one day I had an awakening that, hey, I'm being inauthentic. I'm striving for the brass ring of that top job. I'm not really being myself. And I went to a much smaller company called Medtronic, where I could really align with the purpose and value of restoring people to full life and health and very clear values. And it was the best 13 years of my life and probably led to everything else that's happened since then. It was an excellent decision for me personally. I didn't need that big company. Now, Medtronic became a big company thanks to our business growing faster than we anticipated, or I anticipated. But it was, but I share that experience all the time with people because unless I do, people don't feel comfortable sharing their crucibles, their difficult times, their dilemmas, frankly, with me.
Well, and as you transformed Medtronic through that, from that purpose-led vantage point, you clearly brought people along. And so one question from the audience here is, how do you best align company values to your own values, to the values
Ah,
of the leader?
that's a great question. Well, I think, sometimes, first of all, it's important to discover your true north independent of that, but then you go into the world and you need to work with an organization where your values are consistent. I work for an organization called Litton Industry, now been absorbed into Northrop Grumman. but they believed in paying bribes. They believed in cooking the books. And at a certain point in time, my division was doing extremely well, but I knew I couldn't buy into the corporation. I had to make a change. Honeywell had great values. It was just that the purpose wasn't clear. So in Medtronic, though, I finally found the place where I could align those things with my own purpose and my values. And I just say to anyone listening, keep looking for that. Find that place and find a place within. Don't be too quick to reject your current organization. Find that place within and bring people around to that point of view that you need to have that alignment.
Yeah. Yeah. And everyone listening here, like for those of you who have found that place, it'd be great if you could share it in the chat below. Also, for those who may not have found that place yet, to get some inspiration from it, be great for us to hear about it as well. Another question that came in was, you know, if I go back to some of the work around the life cycle, it was fascinating, especially for the new CEOs as they were stepping into the role. They were really thinking about this role more like a president's role, very internally focused, like believing all the things that they can now do once they have, power and control of the organization. What they underestimated was that they're working for a board and that they're now working basically for 12 bosses rather than one or two. And so, as we're thinking about the CEO working with two teams, their executive team and the board, we talked a little bit about how you connect your own purpose to the organization. How do you connect your purpose with your directors on the boardroom? Is there a different angle to this?
Well, first of all, the company has to be clear about its purpose. And I think company CEOs and boards don't spend nearly enough time reinforcing that. So I'll give you an example. I served on the board of what was Dayton Hudson and became Target, a great retailer. And Bob Ulrich, as the CEO, put his stake in the ground at differentiating himself with Walmart by trying to serve everyone, white collar workers, blacks, Latinx, gays in particular. He used to say we're the most gay-friendly company in town. Then his successor once removed, Brian Cornell, did a great job, but he came in feeling that there was going to be a change from the government of the U.S. with the election. 6 days after the inauguration, preemptively capitulated to, with no pressure, to say we're removing diversity and we're removing everything we did with gays. Well, I can tell you a lot of their employees are designers who are gay, and a lot of people who are heterosexual don't want to work in an environment that isn't sensitive to those issues. And the protests now are really all over the country and certainly here in Minneapolis. Costco, on the other hand, quite conservative company. I know the CEO had done brilliantly. They had a shareholder that wanted to take that all the way to a shareholder vote, and they did. They said, okay, let's vote on it. And they said, we stand for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the shareholder got 2% of the vote. The Costco management and the board of directors got 98%, a stunning level. And so it just showed, if you stay true, your people will back you, and the shareholders that want to back on your company stock are going to back you as well. So don't engage in trying to change too quickly.
Yeah, you're already getting at a great point. I mean, these are great illustrations of friction points, and someone in the chat must be experiencing one of those friction points as well. And they're asking, well, if you have found your true north and you feel like the organization is fully behind it, but then you realize your board or your owners may have a completely different compass. How do you navigate this? What do you do?
You haven't spent enough time with your board going over this.
I was going to go there as well.
You need to illustrate how this plays out. If Medtronic, let's say, as a company's true north is restoring people to full life and health, and there's pressure to dump a business which has enormous potential, but has a ways to go to realize that potential, but you dump it too quickly because the board's under pressure or the shareholders under pressure, you've really abandoned what your company's all about. So Medtronic, we actually shifted the metric, and we reviewed that with the board. It's instead of saying what are the earnings per share, we had that. But the number one metric for the employee base, now numbering 96,000 people, was how many seconds will it be until another person's life is restored by a Medtronic product? When I went there, it was 100 seconds. When I left, it was 7. Today, it's 2 per second. And at the annual holiday party, the CEO puts up on the screen 78 million. That's how many people we restored last year. I tell you, that's what the employees resonate. People that are doing quality in a production line, people that are discovering things in the labs, People are helping doctors. It's one patient at a time to make up that 78 million. And that's what people resonate with. Yeah, then the earnings per share are because of that, because you're providing great value to those people.
It's a great point, Bill. My initial reaction was there as well. If you're encountering that kind of situation, it's a warning light that you haven't spent enough time with your board, right? You haven't done the discovery work early on to really assess out where they are and to bring them on along on the journey. And that is a really risky disconnect, especially in the early years of in the early tenure years of a CEO when they're not quite as established yet, right? It's a different story when you're in your mid tenure years, you're established, you've shown your capacity, and then you can have that rich dialogue. But in the early years, it's a very fragile moment, and worthwhile to do the discovery work. And we see all too many times a new CEO stepping into the role, treating the board relations maybe as important, not urgent, and there's a ton of urgent stuff going on. And as a result, not having the social capital in those moments when it really matters, right?
Well, that's well said.
Yeah. Hey, keep getting questions from the chat, and I'll go there in just a second again. But I want to get in at least one of my own in before we drop, and I guess we can go another 10 minutes, given that we were late. But one of the most powerful assertions is that leaders are made, not born. And for someone watching today who aspires to be a CEO but doesn't see themselves as a natural leader, what's the first step in their leadership journey?
Well, I think you are born with certain qualities, and you have to discover what those are that you can use to make a difference in the world. And I love the idea of the strengths, playing to your strengths. And I think you need to play to your strengths. You need to find a position where something really excites you. You're highly motivated, and it plays to your strengths. You need to look for that kind of position. It's what we call the sweet spot when your motivations, particularly intrinsic motivations, intersect with your capabilities. But those are things you're born with, but then you have to develop them. Think of yourself like an athlete. You're not going to make it in the NBA finals day unless you're practicing shooting every day. Maybe you're not born as a great shooter. You have to practice that every single day. Now, or a doctor, you have to practice your surgery every day. And so those things come together. So I believe you're born with qualities, but then you have to continually develop yourself. And by the way, that doesn't stop, Claudius, when you become CEO. Some people think it stops. Oh, they chose me, here I am. No, you have to continue to develop. I feel like I'm learning and developing every day. Like Satya Nadella believes in a growth mindset. The growth mindset comes from, are you learning every single day? I'm learning from you and from some of these questions being asked. Once you stop doing that, then you're really stagnating, you're really losing touch with reality.
That's such a great point, right? Like if I like back one of those conversations we had is and it's the board's role to figure out, are you a one-trick pony, right?
Yeah,
And the best CEOs, I think of Shantanu Narayan at Adobe or Chris
yeah.
Nassetta at Hilton. They have this built into their leadership regimen every 3 to 5 years to really think about the way that they can reinvent what needs to come, what that next S curve will be for them. So it's a really
By
good
the way,
reminder.
just to interrupt you, Shantan is a great example at Adobe because he has evolved their strategy consistently, but he is the same guy. I was out there and did a program for him a year ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's the same guy he was when he came to our new CEO program at Harvard 12, 14 years ago. He's the same person, but he's evolved his strategy, and Adobe has continued to adapt. A good example of someone who didn't do that was Steve Ballmer when he had 14 years at Microsoft and didn't do that. Satya comes in and he continued to evolve his strategy, but he's the same authentic Satya he was when he took the job.
Yeah. No, and as we're talking about names, one question that came in here, which I love, is besides yourself, who are today's courageous, honest, and humble servant leaders? Like what are some of the names that come to mind?
Well, there's some great ones out there running big companies. Doug McMillan at Walmart has done a spectacular job at Walmart. It's over a long period of time. And he totally transformed the company. In fact, he made a move to raise the wages of his people significantly from, like 30%. Stock went down 38%. Of course, then it came way back up and it proved out. And so he was very authentic in what he did. Craig Jelinek at Costco that I mentioned earlier. Mary Barra has faced a lot of troubles at General Motors, but she stayed true to what she believes, and I give her tremendous amount of credit under all the pressure. And frankly, yeah, she's getting hit from every side now with the tariffs and supply chain and everything, but she is a fantastic leader. And I mentioned Satya Nadella, probably is the best leader in the world today. And another one I'd mentioned that's getting blasted too right now is Tim Cook. Look, we can't build iPhones in the US, so what's wrong with shifting your supply chain, balancing out between China and India in case something goes wrong with our relationship with China? On the other hand, he promised the president of the United States 500 billion in investment in the US in the next 4 years in physical investment. That's incredible. I can't believe how big that figure is. But hey, he's done that, and he stayed true to it. The president even attacked him for diversity because he wouldn't change diversity. Tim is gay. He's true to what he believes. And by the way, Apple's not going to back down from that. Go good for him. So those are just a few people.
Fantastic, fantastic examples. Now, kind of gets to the some of the notions that we hear sometimes is authentic leadership is rigid. Effective leaders must adapt their style to different situations. How do you respond to that concern of being authentic and that maybe limiting a leader's effectiveness?
Well, think of it this way. You have a solid base of your values and your purpose. That doesn't change. But what does change, I said earlier, you have to be flexible in adapting strategy and tactics. Certainly in today's world, like tariffs changing every day, you have to adapt your tactics and your plans to that. And if you get rigid on that, you're going to fail. So I believe that authentic leaders have to be adaptable and they have to be flexible. And if you do that, you'll be successful. But that doesn't mean you're adapting your values. Oh, people say we're not going to do DEI today, we're getting rid of it. No, no. You do what you believe in. You treat your people well if you believe in that. And so continue doing that. So
that's fantastic. So, hey, dear audience, full transparency. I have one more question from the audience. I have one question from my end. And so if you have any questions, throw them into the chat now as we continue. Here's another one, Bill, which is probably going to be I'm going to be interested to hear your perspective on it because in today's rap, because some of it might be actually geared towards the day-to-day work that we do at Spence Stewart around CEO succession. So how do you approach succession planning and talent development to ensure that unconventional leaders, those from technical, sustainability, purpose-driven backgrounds, have a path to the C-suite?
absolutely important. And I believe some of those so-called non-traditional leaders are the ones that made the best leaders. The one doesn't the person you're going to predict. I've watched what Gianrico Ferrugia, who comes from Malta. He was a pure researcher, and he raised a hand, wants to get into leadership. He's done a fantastic job running the Mayo Clinic, #1 medical center in the world. I also was on the board for 7 years, and I coached him. And he is a great leader, but he's very unconventional. And so we had conventional leaders that he actually was selected over. So I think good boards do that, helped by firms like yours to look for that. So, but here's the thing, a board makes a big mistake saying, oh, what if our leader gets run over by a truck? Who are we going to put in? Well, probably put in somebody on a short-term basis around the leader's same age. No, you need to have a pool of like 25 people and assessing these people and helping and have a development plan for each one of these people, and then maybe narrow it down like I went to Exxon with this procedure in selecting the new CEO. Then you narrow down to 5, and then eventually you get to 2, and you decide, okay, who is the best of these 2, and you have them assessed professionally. But I think you need that pool of people. You need somebody to help you. Are these the people that we could see becoming CEO of our firm? And look, if you don't have anyone, then you do an external search. But that's not where you start. So that allows the unconventional leaders. Now, if your company's in trouble, you may have to bring in an unconventional leader to do things very differently. I've seen people come in and do that and turn them around. Paul Pullman came in Unilever and did a fantastic job, very unconventional in traditional terms. Fantastic leader. And so I do believe in that.
Well, Bill, we're still hiring. So if you're looking for the next chapter in your in your career, this is, it's spot on. I would add sort of, or not add, reiterate what you said. Really, when it comes down to succession planning, so two major mistakes that boards do is one, short term, right? Succession planning really is about creating options over multiple time horizons. It's not about what happens tomorrow or what happens next year. And in that, when you frame the exercise as such, succession planning just becomes a positive outcome of a rigorous talent development progress that helps to elevate people from those different backgrounds. All too often, we see the frame to be cast too narrow, focused on too few individuals that may be close to the zone, when really you can double click into the layers below. And my own research shows that some of the most successful CEOs are those leapfrog candidates, right? Bill, you mentioned Mary Barra earlier, right? Those
Yeah.
people who come from below the C-suite that just have that potential, and it's a tricky piece. And then second of all, I think boards and CEOs focus too much on the choice rather than creating the slate of choices. And I think that's an important element as well. So maybe, Phil, we talked a lot about sort of authentic leadership and what it means today, but looking ahead 10 years, how do you see the intersection of leadership and authentic leadership and CEO effectiveness evolving? What should the aspiring leaders of today be preparing for that might be different tomorrow?
It's interesting in our new CEO programs at Harvard. I've been personally involved when we haven't come through in groups of 12, but it's up to about 500 now. I've been personally involved in. What I see happening is people are really prepared, Claudius, for dealing with how to run a business, and they give them successively larger business, maybe give them an overseas assignment. They come back, they get really good. They know how to build a team. They know how to put a plan together, a strategy, and how to make the numbers. What they don't know how to do is deal with all these external factors. And so when you ask them what are their greatest challenges, 90% of them are dealing with an external challenge because they've been no training, there's no preparation. And the C-suite, the CEO and his staff, if you will, kind of hold that, or her staff, kind of hold that to themselves. And so a lot of these operational people never get any exposure to how do you deal with an activist investor that just shows up and buys 1.1% of your stock and wants you to make radical changes. Okay, how do you deal with the government coming in and demanding things of you? And these are really tough questions. And so I think you really need to get exposure to dealing with external as well as internal and not be sheltered. So the CEOs I've seen fail, largely fail, not because they can't run a business, it's because they don't know how to deal with the external factors.
It's such a good point. It's someone it's good to summarize it on this notion of preparedness beats preparation, right? This idea of being in a state of preparedness and flexible to adapt in the moment. And all too often, in our work, we see future CEOs readying themselves to step into the role, almost over preparing for one particular scenario. But then you're being hit from left field. I mean, look at the last 3 months, right? There's every day there's something flying in from left field, and being able to adapt quickly and stay the course. I think that's a critical capability that, from a pure operational lens, that's a management lens, right? That's not a leadership lens.
Well, let me comment on that because you just nailed it. Yes, I've seen world-class managers fail because they lack what I call the C gene. C
Yeah.
gene is courage, and that's an integral part. To be a great leader today, you have to have courage. Ken Frazier had some of the most courage I've ever seen as CEO of Merck. Increased his research budget when everyone else is decreasing, and the pressure of the stockholders told him to do that. He had courage in dealing with Charlottesville. But you need courage to do that, to go against the grain because your shareholders all line up and say, break up your company. I remember when Lou Gerstner came into IBM and then Sam Palmisano followed him. They had courage. No, we're going to be much stronger together. So you don't just capitulate to the latest move that some external shareholder or some activist wants. You've got to have courage to stay the course. And so that's something you have throughout your life cycle, is that work. But I can't teach you courage in a classroom. You have to learn it through life experience. This is not about jumping off a cliff. This is about experiencing situations in which you have to demonstrate your courage. So I hope in that selection process you're talking about, we look at the courage the individual either has or is willing to demonstrate.
Wow. Courage to stay the course. I mean,
Yep.
what a
Courage.
great wrap. I know you and I can go on forever, and we will, but I also want to be mindful of everyone's time here watching us. It's been a true delight learning from you in the past, and just what a fantastic conversation. Bill, thank you for joining us today and sharing how your true north really is that guiding star that helps you navigate the journey day to day, because you have to lift up and look out far in order to be navigating what's in front of you, right?
Well, that's well said. You have to have the long-term vision, but also the day-to-day, and how do you integrate the two?
Yeah. Well, Bill, thank you again for being here. If you have a copy of your book, hold it in the camera. I'll do the same here.
Of course I do.
And
True North. The
fantastic.
Emerging Leader Edition, because I wanted to make sure younger leaders are focusing on their true north and not just waiting until they got to be CEO.
That's
It's
right.
too
Yeah,
late.
no, they go well together. Well, thank you again, Bill. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.